Hello, and welcome to Neighborhood Unitarian Universalist Church in Pasadena. Welcome to all members, friends, and guests here in person and virtually. Neighborhood Church creates and grows an inclusive community of faith connected by love, spirit, and service. My name is Taylor Chazen, and I am a member of your Board of Trustees. Today's service is led by our interim minister, Reverend Dr. Teresa Cooley, with music by our music director, Dr. Zenaida Robles, guest keyboardist Linda Lulian, and John Odell. Please take a moment to silence your devices as we begin our service. We acknowledge our presence on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Gabalino Tongva peoples. We honor the Gabalino Tongva as the traditional caretakers of the lands and waters this campus sits on, the elders who lived here before, the indigenous peoples today, and the generations to come. Thank you for joining us as we continue to prioritize connection over perfection in this hybrid service, which is streamed on YouTube and which we are recording for future viewing. Seating is available in the back for those who want to be sure not to appear in the recording. Based on guidance from our COVID safety team, masks are required for congregants inside and optional outside. You'll find information on our website about the many ways to connect with our church community throughout the week, both in person and virtually. Right now, Neighborhood Chorus and Neighborhood Bells are looking for new members. Please talk to Zenaida for more info. Please join us this afternoon for a social justice history salon at 4:30 in Ross Chapel and on Zoom. Would you be interested in participating in a bereavement, caregiver, or divorce support group this fall? Please contact Ann Grant by August 30th if so. Our Chalice Circle registration is now open online, so please sign up. And please see the newsletter, Sunday email, or welcome table for more information on these and other activities. And now I'd like to welcome our Search Committee Chair, Len Miyamoto, for a special announcement.
Good morning, everyone. I am Lynn Miyamoto, the chair of your search committee for our new minister. I'm excited to share that your search committee will be sending out a congregational survey in the next week or so. The survey will be available over a 4-week period of time. This survey will help you, your congregational leadership, your search committee, and your future minister understand our congregation better. Responses to these questions will guide cottage meetings, discussions, and enrich the narrative about our ministry context that your search committee shares with ministerial applicants. The congregational survey is a real opportunity for our congregation to move toward a different future with a new minister. I'd like to thank already the amazing committee members of the search committee who have done a lot of work, to Reverend Teresa, who has helped us also guide us in this process, and your board and staff. So on behalf of your search committee, I thank you in advance for taking the time to complete this important congregational survey. Thank you.
Again, welcome to Neighborhood Church, whoever you are and wherever you are in your spiritual journey. Welcome to this inclusive faith community connected by love, spirit, and service.
Good morning. I just realized that we did away with a little ritual that I love because of COVID, but now maybe we can engage with it, which is to turn to your neighbors and say good morning. Clearly, you missed that as much as I did. Glad to see all of you here this morning. Our invocation is from the poet Michael Kiesau Moore. Listen, turn everything off. When the noise of our lives drifts away, when the chatter of our minds sinks into that perfect lake of nothing, then, oh then, we can apprehend that golden mountain always there, waiting for us to be still enough to hear it. Come, let us worship together.
Our opening hymn is number 1051 in your teal hymnals or on the screens above you. Please rise in body or in spirit and join us in singing 1051, We Are.
Giving is a spiritual practice through which we put our values into action. Each Sunday, our congregation dedicates 100% of our contributions to a local social justice organization. This week, our gifts go to our racial justice endowment. Please give generously through our website, text to give, or the QR code or box available at the exit. If you wish to make a payment toward your pledge, make a note in the subject line or use an envelope available at the box outside. Here to tell us more about the Racial Justice Endowment is Gail Shand.
Good morning, neighborhood. I am Gail Shand, a facilitator for the Neighborhood People of Color Group. In 2020, the Endowed Fund for Racial Justice was established by Clyde Derrick, a member of Neighborhood Church since 1997. An openly gay man, Clyde has long supported racial and LGBTQ equity. In light of the Black Lives Matter movement and an openly racist US president and national climate in 2020, Clyde was compelled to create the NUUC Endowed Fund for Racial Justice to ensure that racial justice would always be a component of neighborhood Unitarian Universalist Church spiritual and social justice fabric. The fund provides support at Neighborhood Church for social justice work and musical expression on the theme of racial justice. Uses are determined with the involvement of associated music and social justice staff and the neighborhood people of color. The fund's uses may include guest speakers and performers, education programs for all ages, conference sponsorship, acquisition of books, new music, or musical instruments, printing and materials, etc. The fund was used recently to compensate Indigenous contributors who were part of Hiawatha's wedding feast that was performed during last week's service. Absolutely beautiful and inspiring. If you haven't seen it as yet, please do watch it on YouTube. Thank you. And here are some testimonials from 2 donors. From Sibel Garcia Cohel. This year, I am making a special donation to the Neighborhood Racial Justice Endowment. Not only should our words mirror our values, our actions must embody them as well. Donating money is not the only action we can take, but it is an important one. As a BIPOC, I know that building a more equitable world starts at home, and neighborhood is my spiritual home. Here is where I begin. Where will your actions toward a more equitable world begin? Together, we can make bigger strides and have greater impact. Will you join me? And from James Coons. We are in a very new era for many members of our congregation and denomination. As a lifelong UU, I'm fortunate to have been in spaces where I was welcome, but more commonly, I am in UU spaces where the message is that we should be welcoming to diversity. This is a good message, but one that is a constant reminder that BIPOC individuals are not fully accepted. We need to change these institutional messages. I have chosen to donate to the Neighborhood Racial Justice Endowment because it is important for our larger congregation to know that we are here spiritually, socially, and fiscally. I hope you will join us as we work towards widening the circle of this spiritual community. Thank you for your future donations.
in mood. Maria, Santa Maria, Maria, ora pro nobis, nobis peccatoribus, nunc in hora mortis nostrae.
Thank you, John. That was just beautiful. Let us gather in the spirit of prayer, meditation, reflection, as we share in these words from Adrienne Marie Brown. We out here, releasing the walls that hold in harm and danger. Releasing any idea that shrinking ourselves is what makes room for others. Learning to trust in the abundant world which needs all of us, all of our gifts. Releasing expectations of any attention on those who are not trying to grow right now. Pace is indeed subjective, but I hear tomorrow calling, and I am in love with that sound. Releasing the small ways obligation has crept into my heart, and letting love and liberation cleanse me back to my authentic, odd, and positively obsessed self. Releasing those I can't forgive and those who can't forgive me. May we be happy, rebirthed, yes, but happy. Releasing what I cannot carry, cannot swallow, cannot believe, cannot feel, and cannot trust. Releasing the sharp and isolating teeth of superiority that sits inside of recognition like a Venus flytrap. I know better. I'm not better. Releasing regret and shaping change so that I can end patterns of regret, particularly releasing any patterns that keep me from letting feeling guide my actions. My intuition is becoming a pendulum in my cells, and I am learning to trust my direction, my tongue, and my mistakes. Releasing any narrative that asks me to sacrifice my health for my relevance. I only want to mean something to those who care about my flesh, my bones, and my spirit. Prayers up. Thank you. Amen.
Just a quick note, just to let you all know that John, Teresa, and I all tested prior to this service. We did our rapid test and we're all negative, so that we can offer you the safest possible experience without masks today. So thank you for your support.
Let me be, no. No more talk of darkness. Forget these wide-eyed fears. I'm here, nothing can harm you. My words will warm and calm you. Let me be your freedom. Let daylight dry your tears. I'm here with you, beside you, to guard you and to guide you.
Say you love me every waking moment. Turn my head with talk of summertime. Say you need me with you now and always. Promise me that all you say is true. That's all I ask of you.
Let me be your shelter. Let me be your light. You're safe, no one will find you. Your fears are far behind you.
All I want is freedom, a world with no more night, and you always beside me to hold me and to hide me.
Then say you'll share with me one love, one lifetime. Let me lead you from your solitude. Say you need me with you here beside you. Anywhere you go, let me go too. Love me, that's all I ask of you.
Say you'll share with me one love, one lifetime. Say the word and I will follow you.
Share each day with me, each night, each morning.
Say you love me.
You know I do. Love me, that's all I ask of you. Anywhere you go, let me go too. Love me, that's all I ask of you.
It's not fair to make the preacher cry. There are some weeks when I look at the topic that I have chosen and the description that I put out there, and I wonder, what in the world was I thinking? I rather blithely talked about the art of saying no as if that's an easy concept. And all I needed to do was to give you detailed instructions about how to get there. But the more I really thought about it this week and delved into it, the more it got me into all of these tangles of the nature of the self, how we really know ourselves, how we can be ourselves in the midst of community. Welcome to my week. Where is a resident philosopher when I need them? I actually got started on this topic when I was talking with two friends separately about the other. Always tricky territory. I've learned enough over the years to know that I cannot explain one person to the other. All I can do is reflect back what I hear from each of them and encourage them to talk to each other. In this case, one friend that I'll call Henry had come up with what he thought was a really exciting idea about what to do on a trip that he's taking with this other friend I'll call Mary. And this idea, typical of Henry, involved more expense and more effort than Mary really wanted to get into. So when I talked with Mary, she told me it was really hard to say no to Henry given his excitement, and she didn't want to damage their friendship, and she thought that she had succeeded in saying no to his grand ideas. And when I talked to Henry after this, he told me how exciting it was that Mary planned to join him in all of his great plans. So I returned to the wisdom that I have learned from the excellent book, The Power of a Positive No, by William Ury, probably best known for co-writing the book, Getting to Yes. And basically, his message is that in order to get to a place where we can feel like we can be comfortable saying no, we need to first understand what our yes is. When we can get in touch with what we really value and what our positive interests are, it becomes easier to say no because we're bolstered by the affirmation of our yes. I recommend this book to people all the time. Another friend of mine credits the book for helping her get twice what she expected from her divorce settlement. Not a bad outcome. So, in the case of my two friends, I encouraged Mary to figure out what she really wanted to do to find that positive yes, and to think about how she could say that to Henry while still making it clear that she valued the relationship. Simple, right? But Mary said, I really don't know what I want. I can get caught up in Henry's excitement and lose my confidence in myself and feel all confused and muddled. So I went back to this book, which I hadn't read in a while, and realized that while it is really helpful in concrete kinds of ways, it isn't that easy to really know what our yeses are, which is when I fell into this metaphysical muddle. Because I've come to believe that we are not totally distinct beings from one another. While it's truly helpful to take the time to really plunge into these deeper questions of what we as individuals need and want and value, it doesn't just end there. Decades ago, the sociologist Robert Bellah helped us confront the fallacies of the extreme individualism of our Western culture. And I think it's worth quoting him at some length. There are truths we do not see when we adopt the language of radical individualism. We find ourselves not independently of other people, but through them. We never get to the bottom of ourselves on our own. We discover who we are face to face and side by side with others in work and love and learning. All of our activity goes on in relationships, groups, associations, communities, interpreted by cultural patterns of meaning. And our individualism is just one such pattern. The positive side of our individualism, our sense of the dignity and worth and moral autonomy of the individual, is dependent in 1,000 ways on a social, cultural, and institutional context that keeps us afloat. There is much in our life that we do not control, that we are not even responsible for, that we receive as grace or face as tragedy. Finally, we're not simply ends in ourselves. We are parts of a larger whole that can neither forget nor imagine in our own image without paying a high price. If we are not to have a self that hangs in the void, slowly twisting in the wind, these are issues we cannot ignore. So if our goal is really to figure out who we are, to claim what we can say yes to in the deepest sense, can we actually really do that completely on our own? I've come to believe that we can't. Our self is not wrapped in plastic that is impermeable. And yet, if we only look to others to define us, we lose ourselves completely in the endless futility of fitting in to others' expectations. So here I turn to the wisdom of Carl Jung. He said, "The paradox is one of our most valuable spiritual possessions. Only the paradox comes anywhere near to comprehending the fullness of life. We live in the midst of this paradox that we are not totally discrete beings, and yet we still must discover and live into the particular kernel of who we are in order to really be in healthy community with others." Another bit of wisdom from Carl Jung. One of Jung's students, when discussing Pilgrim's Progress, asked him what his pilgrimage had been. And he said, "In my case, Pilgrim's Progress consisted of me having to climb down 1,000 ladders until I could reach out my hand to the little clod of earth that I am." I found this quote in a longer post that Kathy Goodson shared on Facebook. There are great sources of spiritual wisdom sometimes in all kinds of places. It was shared by Rachel Alana, who is the author of Midwives of the Soul. And she said the very word human can be traced back to this ancient term of the earth or ground. Perhaps something like that little clod of earth that I am. And like the spreading of roots beneath the tree of life, we must sink into that earth within ourselves, weave roots of our own being to awaken to the reality that those roots are connected to so many others. For it's the deepening down, she says, that connects us to our own soul and to the soul of others, to the very earth itself. And it is in the dirt that we find the true gold, the embodied soul, and what makes us real. A great source for really grappling with this paradox is Brené Brown's book, Braving the Wilderness. In it, she talks about the difference between fitting in and belonging. She says, belonging is the innate human desire to be a part of something larger than ourselves. And because this yearning is so primal, we often try to acquire it by fitting in and seeking approval, which are not only hollow substitutes for belonging, but often barriers to it. Because true belonging only happens when we present our authentic, imperfect selves to the world. Our sense of belonging can never be greater than our sense of self-acceptance. She tells story after story about how she's had to learn this wisdom over and over again in her life. And she begins the book with some enlightenment that came to her when she had 2 different requests for speaking engagements. One of them came from a religious group who talked about how inspiring her work was and how much they appreciated her coming from this religious perspective. But, you know, they said you often use curse words when you do your presentations. So couldn't you do a talk without doing that? And around the same time, she had another inquiry from the business world. This group would love for her to speak, but couldn't she do that without talking about her religious faith? So as she processed these requests, she came to this conclusion. If you think I'm going to clean up the truth or put a spit-shine on people's honest experiences, you're wrong. I'm not going to go all Joe Pesci in Goodfellas, but if you can't handle me saying pissed off or bullshit, or you need me to pretend that faith doesn't matter to me, I am not your girl. There are lots of great teachers and speakers. You'll just need to find one who will dress up, clean up, and shut up. That's not me. Not anymore. As a person of faith who finds it difficult to have any kind of intense conversation without using curse words, some of you probably experienced that, unfortunately for me, I can only cheer her on. But she also makes it clear that it is not, in fact, easy to figure out where the lines between honoring the self and being with others are drawn. Especially now, when the world asks us to pick a side in almost every conversation, and when making ourselves vulnerable feels way too scary and dangerous. Falling back on our assumed communities of common values where we surround ourselves with people who not only think like we do, who only think like we do, cuts us off from true learning and connection to others. Something for us to think about. Especially now when the pandemic has made us deeply afraid not just of the stranger, but even of one another. It is hard to put ourselves out there. Breaking out of our cultural bunkers takes a particular kind of courage because it requires, as she says, not just braving that wilderness, but becoming that wilderness. It's about breaking down the walls, abandoning our ideological bunkers, living from our wild heart rather than our weary hurt. I love that phrase, living from our wild heart rather than our weary hurt. So let me take this down from the theoretical into the experiential and relate a story that she tells about the actress Viola Davis. It turns out that Davis grew up in an extremely violent and deprived household. And I don't know how she made it out of those terrible circumstances, but she had clearly some kind of spiritual strength that I can only dimly understand. And when she tried to break into the acting world, she was told over and over again that her true self, in all of her identities, wasn't what the producers or directors were looking for. The notes she received were things like, not attractive enough, too old, too dark-skinned, not skinny enough. Viola Davis says, they tell you to develop a thick skin so things don't get to you. What they don't tell you is that your thick skin will keep everything from getting out, too. Love, intimacy, vulnerability. I don't want that. She says, thick skin doesn't work anymore. I want to be transparent and translucent. And for that to work, I won't own other people's shortcomings and criticisms. I won't put what you say about me onto my load. What Viola Davis describes as a perfect illustration of what Brené Brown talks about, living in this wilderness of not knowing with a strong back and a soft front. She gets this concept from Buddhism, and Buddhist teacher Roshi Joan Halifax explains, All too often, our so-called strength comes from fear, not love. Instead of having a strong back, many of us have a defended front shielding our weak spine. In other words, we walk around brittle and defensive, trying to conceal our lack of confidence. If we strengthen our backs, metaphorically speaking, and develop a spine that is flexible but sturdy, then we can risk having a front that is soft and open. How can we give and accept care with strong back, soft front compassion, moving past fear into a place of genuine tenderness? She says, I believe it comes about when we can be truly transparent, seeing the world clearly and letting the world see into us. So what does all of this tell us about the art of saying no? At least I got that word right in this service description, because it is an art. It is not a science with clear to-do steps. If we want to understand what our true yes is, I think we need to engage in a kind of dance in which we go deep within ourselves, as Carl Jung describes, but finding there not a rigid sense of self, but that core sense, that clod of earth, those deepest values that guide us in the midst of our wildernesses. And then open ourselves to learning more about ourselves by engaging with others. And I think this is what Unitarian Universalist religious community can do at its best. Honor our individual expressions, our ideas, our beliefs, our different identities, at the same time that it helps hold us in community that allows us to feel connected to something much larger than ourselves. A community in which we can learn and grow. So when that question comes at you that asks you for a yes or a no, what do? Firstly, I think it's important to take your time to answer, if possible. When we react in the moment, we often opt for that which helps us fit in, or we reject the idea out of fear. But when we allow ourselves the space and time to go deep, even if just for a few moments, we can listen for that core response that our soul is offering to us. In my theology, I call that the still small voice of God. Or we can respond to an invitation to learn that comes with that question. As Brené Brown says, the mark of the wild heart is living out a paradox of love in our lives. It's the ability to be tough and tender, excited and scared, brave and afraid, all in the same moment. It's showing up in our vulnerability and in our courage, being both fierce and kind. There, in that paradox, is where the answers lie. Amen.
Our closing hymn is number 112 in your gray hymnal or on the screens above. Please rise in body or in spirit and join us in singing number 112, Do You Hear?
In the heights on the plain, in the vale.
Our benediction is from Jan Richardson. How strong, what stirs on the other side, breathing with you and blessing you still, forever bound to you, but freeing you into this living, into this world, so much wider than you ever knew. Amen. Go in peace.